The First Mithridatic War opened out of frictions long in the making between the Roman Republic and the Black Sea Kingdom of Pontus. Mithridates VI. Eupator, brilliant and ambitious, envisioned a new order led by himself in the Hellenic and Anatolian world, one in which city-states were no longer squeezed by Roman tax farmers and client kings no longer bowed by habit. He intervened in Cappadocia and Bithynia, installing and deposing rulers at will, while in the west, Greek elites grew resentful of Roman exactions. The crisis crested in 88 BCE when a coordinated wave of killings swept Asia Minor, the slaughter of Roman and Italian settlers that left tens of thousands dead. Vows of vengeance rang in Rome. The Senate handed supreme command to Lucius Cornelius Sulla. The alignment of forces was now unmistakable. On one side, Mithridates VI, with able generals such as Archelaus and Taxiles. On the other, Sulla, bringing the iron discipline of the Roman legions to the fields of Greece and the shores of Asia. Sulla landed in Greece short of ships and money, but not determination. Athens, under the tyrant Aristion and aligned with Mithridates, became his first target. He ringed Piraeus, the fortified harbor held by Archelaus, and tightened a second noose around the city itself. Lacking a fleet, he built the means to break stone with timber and sweat, immense approach ramps, siege towers, and engines, even felling sacred groves outside the walls for lumber. At Piraeus, sections of curtain wall crashed down only to be patched by Pontic engineers in the dark. Fire, smoke, and limestone dust turned the sky a harsh gray. Inside Athens, as grain ran out, the groan of the populace merged with the drumbeat of war. In March 86 BCE, Roman troops breached the city, storming streets already hollowed by famine. Piraeus, meanwhile, was abandoned by Archelaus, who withdrew his garrison to the sea, proof that the Pontic fleet still gave Mithridates room to maneuver. But Greece on land no longer stood firm against the legionary tread. Archelaus concentrated a large field army in Boeotia, bringing scythed chariots, the terror of Anatolian battlefields. Sulla marched north and chose ground near Chaeronea to bar the way. He formed his legions in deep blocks and planted the front with stakes and shallow pits, low fieldworks, meant to blunt a charge. At dawn, the Pontic horns tore the air. The chariots surged forward, scythe blades glittering over dew-wet grass. The prepared obstacles broke their pace. Horses balked, wheels bit and flipped, and the formation rippled into confusion. Roman javelins came down as a steel rain, and the heavy infantry advanced, shields locked, pressing a step at a time. On Sulla's right, Pontic allied cavalry tried to hook around and burst through the Roman flank, but a cold, compact counter-thrust met them edge-on and turned them aside. By evening, the Archelaus wing buckled and ran for the coast. On the fields of Chaeronea, discipline beat ardor. Archelaus did not concede. A month later at Orchomenus, he fused reinforcements from Euboea and Thessaly and sought to strike back. The marshy ground was treacherous. If Pontic cavalry could dominate the open patches, Roman legions would struggle to pivot. Sulla looked over the sodden flats and chose to nail down the field. He ordered ditch and embankment lines driven out to split the enemy's maneuver space. Archelaus understood at once, hurling horse and light infantry forward to smash the Roman work parties. Half-finished banks and wet earth became a living front, where every spadeful of soil and every stake cost blood. Pontic spears probed through Roman shields. Roman lines closed ranks and funneled attackers into narrow corridors between earthen spurs, where short swords could finish what the terrain had begun. At the critical hour, Sulla rode to the front himself, pointing his commander's staff at a half-built wall. "Here is where we stand." The shout rippled down the ranks. On day 2, once the earthworks pinched shut like a pair of tongs, the Pontic mass found itself driven onto boggy ground. ranks disordered under volleys of pila and the steady push of spear and shield. As dusk fell, recall drums beat. Archelaus' standards vanished in a curtain of dust. Greece belonged to Sulla, yet the war was not only decided on central Greek plains. Across the Aegean, allied squadrons, most notably Rhodes, and the flotillas that Lucullus painstakingly recruited chipped away at Pontic naval advantage. Commercial ports were blockaded, Archelaus' lifelines frayed. In Asia Minor, while Sulla was still crushing resistance in Greece, Roman politics turned chaotic. The Senate sent Lucius Valerius Flaccus to supersede Sulla. Flaccus was overthrown by his subordinate Gaius Flavius Fimbria, who seized command and drove hard into the interior. Marching fast, Fimbria beat Pontic detachments in the north and threatened the heartland of Mithridates. Land pressure and maritime strangulation together made the tilt of the balance plain. After pacifying Greece, Sulla crossed into Asia. Wherever he went, he restated Roman order. Cities that had embraced Mithridates were fined heavily. Taxes long deferred were recalled with interest. Open enemies were punished, yet there was an avenue for those willing to submit. For Pontus, after Archelaus' defeats, and with Fimbria probing deep, the options narrowed. Mithridates chose negotiation. The two armies camped within sight of each other near Dardanus, on the windy Troad. Ancient writers say Archelaus helped broker the meeting. Fierce on the field, Sulla proved matter-of-fact at the table. He demanded complete evacuation of recent conquests, Cappadocia, Bithynia, and the cities of Asia, along with the surrender of warships, the release of prisoners, and a crushing indemnity. In return, Mithridates would keep his throne in Pontus. The Treaty of Dardanus in 85 BCE ended the first round of the contest. In the Roman camps of Asia, the news of peace moved like a gust. Cook fires flared, legionaries drummed shield rims, Greek wine passed from hand to hand. In the center, Sulla proclaimed the stand down, rewarding the units that had held firm at Chaeronea and Orchomenus. Booty was divided by regulation, and triumphal standards rose before the headquarters tent. For Greeks dragged through the storm, dawn returned quietly. Harbors reopened, grain markets reassembled, men reset charred stones in the walls of Piraeus. And in Athens, the libraries and philosophical schools began their slow revival. In the east, Mithridates returned to Sinop, accepting concessions in the present to save strength for the future. Viewed whole, the war turns on three axes of leadership. On the Pontic side stood Mithridates VI, courageous, a strategist of range, symbol to many Greeks of resistance to Rome, and a ruler fluent in both conventional war and shock theater. With him marched Archelaus, resourceful and mobile, capable of orderly retreats to preserve his core, and Taxiles, who helped assemble coalition forces in Boeotia. On the Roman side, Sulla, a commander of cold nerve and stubbornness, who made dirt and shovel into weapons. Lucullus, the meticulous organizer of fleets and diplomacy, knitting port to port. And Fimbria, audacious in the field even as his path through Roman politics was violent. On the battlefield, Rome's edge crystallized through discipline, improvised fieldworks, and the knack for shifting from active defense to measured counterstroke. At Chaeronea and Orchomenus, lines of stakes, pits, and earthen banks turned the vaunted scythed chariots into wreckage. Pontic advances snapped where they had expected to slash. At sea, the loss of Aegean command severed Mithridates' supply arteries and forced him off the offensive and into parley. The treaty closed a chapter, not the book. Mithridates remained Mithridates, a formidable foe. Rome remained Rome, an imperium unwilling to brook a long challenge. But in that moment of 85 BCE, legionary standards tossed in the Troad wind. Cries of Io Triumphe sounded over pots of wine and loaves of bread, and Greek roads grew busy again. A short, fierce war left a classical lesson etched deep. Battlefield discipline, the art of field fortification, and the tempo of operations can swing the balance between imperial ambition and the endurance of an old republic. Sulla would soon sail for Italy to dive into another political storm. Mithridates would bide his time for the next turn of the sword. Yet in the memory of Greeks and Romans alike, the dust-heavy days at Chaeronea and Orchomenus endured as a tragic heroic passage from an age when strategy, will, and terrain spelled the border between survival and ruin.